I'm Sarah Holbrook. I'm the Executive Director of the Pinhead Institute here in Telluride, Colorado, and I'm the lucky interviewer of our mayor, Sean Murphy.
Hi Sarah, great to be back.
How the heck are ya?
I'm good. It's
Yeah.
middle of off season. Of course, it's snowing now.
I know, isn't that so crazy? I mean, it's been dry and hardly any snow all winter, and then all of a sudden this happens.
Suddenly we get what we should have had a month or two
Beautiful
back.
winter wonderland in May.
Precisely. Oh well, it won't last.
No, but
we'll
we
take
need the precipitation.
We'll take the precipitation.
Yes,
Yes,
exactly. Let's talk a little bit about that. I know you had a town council meeting, and we have a whole list of things to talk about. But what about the water restrictions?
So as you might have heard, the town of Mountain Village last week, their town council met and they imposed a water restriction in Mountain Village that started on Tuesday, May 1st.
Okay.
So we have asked our town manager to go ahead and issue our uniquely tailored water restriction, which will be somewhat similar to the Mountain Village restriction in that you won't be allowed to water your lawns, but depending on your address, you can't do daily watering anymore as of effectively the beginning of next week.
Okay.
So the first week of, actually the second full week of May, you'll be we're hoping to be a little bit more aggressive at the beginning and then maybe dial it back if we end up getting more rain or if the summer precipitation happens in greater quantities than we're fearing it might not. But so anyway, the headline there is in order to sort of follow through at a similar time, since it'll be 4 weeks until the next town council meeting in Telluride, i.e. May 29th, we didn't want to wait that long before we took an action, and we didn't have it on our agenda yesterday as an action item. So the town manager, though, is empowered to do that. So I think you'll see a whole menu of restrictions that will be posted on the town website, as well as we'll start advertising in the Planet. And anybody who's curious can also call his or her council person or the town manager for direct information. But there's probably a menu of up to 10 things that we could ask you not to do, like please don't wash your cars. And
don't
please
wash
water your
cars.
lawn only
Water
every
your
other
lawn
day.
only every other day.
You won't be able to fill swimming pools and hot tubs after effectively next week. You probably will be able to top them up as evaporation occurs, but we don't want really that quantity of water being used for that. The other good news is actually at the moment we're not in a water shortage situation. So we have adequate water today, and there's no concern about us having domestic water shortage at this moment, but we anticipate that as the summer opens up
and it gets
and
hotter
as we
and
have
drier.
more and more people and hotter and drier, if that doesn't change, then if we're erring on the side of caution now, then that's a good thing. But otherwise, if we're not, we're going to at least conserve what resources we do have.
As an aside, I remember just meeting with Paul Reich last week, and he's on the school board here, and he was mentioning the turf field. And apparently it used to be that the school was the #1 user of water in the town because of watering their lawn. And now they have this artificial turf, and they're not even in the top 10.
That's terrific.
So, I mean, it seems odd to think in this valley, which is all about mountains and snow and all of that, that people water their lawns, and that can be a water usage problem, but clearly it can, so don't do it.
Well, I think our bigger consumers of water here that are left are the cemetery district. And so this will apply to them, of course, as well. Also, probably this commercial user, but the brewery, I think, is a large water user too. So, but anyway, whatever we can do individually to sort of do our part, it was probably, don't make us get more strict.
Don't run the water while you're washing your dishes. Use a dishwasher if you have
Turn
one.
off the water when you're brushing your teeth, like
exactly.
before and after.
If it's yellow, let it mellow.
It's going to be like California here, isn't it?
Exactly. Well, we might as well do what we can now.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So that was it's kind of a buzzkill headline, but that is just being, I think, prudent and making sure that we don't find ourselves in a worse situation than we might well be in.
Exactly. Well, I'm glad we talked about that. What else happened at the meeting?
We took some actions on housing. Happy to report that actually all the Virginia Placer apartments and the tiny homes are full.
Nice.
The boarding house, we're still accepting applications, so if anybody's interested in the boarding house, we hired a manager
you did
on April
hire a
30th.
manager. Oh, great.
Yeah. And so Max is our new manager, and he's going to be vetting applicants together with Melanie Wasserman, who's our rental manager.
Oh, great.
And we will have hopefully a full boarding house probably the 3rd or 4th week of May.
Wow, that's super.
So stay tuned.
Yeah.
So there's still an open window, though. You can still apply in the next, let's say, week or two. So don't hesitate if that's of interest to you. So, and it should be great. We're moving dirt, as you know, over at the Baked in Telluride sort of Four Corners site. And so we want to make sure people understand the market and Baked and Telluride are open.
Are open,
And
yes.
so,
I had a very exciting experience just there the other day where I was walking along the sidewalk, which is still open, and then I actually had to walk through the construction site with hard hats leading me through.
Really?
It was very exciting. I felt like I was part of the construction team. And then they had to like unlock a gate to let me out. I don't know what was happening, but it felt very on the inside.
Okay.
So, and they were all very nice. So anyhow, I encourage you to go down there and check it out if you want to feel like, I don't know, like you're playing with heavy equipment. It was very exciting.
and I think in the coming weeks you'll see that we're going to do something kind of like Larimer Square, where we're hoping to string lights
Oh,
above that
nice.
walkway,
Yeah.
so that it's a visual clue or cue that, hey, wait,
Yeah,
there is activity
yeah.
down here. These
Happening
businesses
here
are
even
open.
now. Yeah,
and
that's a
so
great
please
idea.
make sure you don't neglect the mountain market
Yes.
as well as our Baked and
Yes.
Telluride
Yes, I'm going to up my
institution.
shopping there, as a matter of fact. Just to, I mean,
Good.
not like one person can make a difference, but yeah, we should all
'Cause that'll
support our
be
local businesses.
Like a 16, 18-month project.
Yeah.
And so we want to make sure that they are not compromised too much
yeah,
in
exactly.
the process.
Yeah.
Also on housing, we took action. We took action on first reading. We'll do a second reading of a measure that exempts locals from the affordable housing mitigation fee.
Okay,
So
sure.
as you might recall, as you know,
Yeah.
earlier this year, we raised some of our basically construction for residential housing fees.
So if you're building a residential house here in the town of Telluride, there's a little fee attached that goes into the pool of money that the town can spend on affordable housing.
That's right,
And that,
exactly.
that percentage is being bumped up, but what you're saying is now they voted to make an exception for
locals
lower-
living and working here, so if you have worked here and lived here for at least 1 year, if you're willing to do the same for the next 4 years and you work a minimum of 1,400 hours a year
Then
in the
your
community,
percentage is lower.
then you could actually be excluded from, you would have a deferral of 75% of the amount of this affordable housing mitigation fee. And when you go to sell your home, then if your buyer is not a local, then the amount becomes due, and it's the buyer's financial responsibility,
Got it.
not the seller.
Got it.
So in effect, we're exempting the true working locals from that fee.
from that mitigation
Right,
fee.
but
All
it'll
right.
just be held in abeyance and then until one day when a non-local buys. You could have a series of locals, though, purchase the same home, and they would all get this exemption. So
Got it, yeah.
this will be,
That seems
it's a
very
positive
sensible.
thing.
Yeah,
So-
and then that'll go into the pool of funds to support other local housing developments.
Exactly, and right now those funds, we have about $1.4 million that comes in every year. About 800,000 of that is from our sales tax, the half a cent sales tax that's devoted to affordable
Sure.
housing. The rest of that are those funds.
So none
it's
of
like
the real
half a
estate
mil
transfer
at least.
tax goes to affordable housing.
That is an
Isn't
excellent
that kind of crazy?
point.
Isn't that kind of nutty?
I was just having lunch today with the with the Regional Housing Authority Director, Shirley Diaz, and she was educating me about what some other communities are doing, more specifically that Aspen takes 2%, so 2% of what we collect here is 3%. They allocate a full 2% to affordable housing.
Wow,
So,
from their own version of their real estate
their real
transfer
estate
tax.
transfer
And we
tax,
take
yep.
3%, and then that goes to capital improvements in the
That's
town
exactly
of
right,
Telluride.
right.
But it doesn't go to affordable housing.
not at this time,
mind
no.
blown.
And 20% of that, because we have our open space, sort of
Right.
20% off the top of all unrestricted revenues, so sales taxes, real estate transfer taxes, business license fees, a few other small fees and fines, goes to a lockbox. So 20% of all those amounts go for open space and have to be used only for the preservation, management, or acquisition of open space.
Okay.
So actually, Councilperson Tommy Watkinson raised yesterday during our meeting, well, could that be changed with respect to the real estate transfer tax? The answer that our town attorney gave us, and that some of us have heard before, is because we did the bond covenants, and we're required to basically agree that we would lockbox that amount, unless and until we've completely paid off our indebtedness on the valley floor, which still stands at about $15 million of principal today. When we get to that point, yes, we can
We can consider doing something else with that 20%.
But
or
as-
some of that 20%.
As was pointed out in yesterday's meeting, well, there's still 80% of that amount that's not restricted.
Yeah.
So we could presumably, that might be one of the tools that we resort to in the future.
Yeah.
And I think that conversation it's starting and it's going to continue in the
Yeah.
next few months. But as we like to frequently say, we don't want to take up too much in terms of weighty or controversial topics during off season.
Oh, right.
So this came
you
up in
want
the
to wait
context
till
of
everybody is there
is back
so
in
that
town,
the
so-
community can speak their minds.
I think you'll hear more about this in June and July. And so that, plus we're also considering, we've asked our town legal staff to go and research and start preparing ballot language for potentially a property tax that would have dedicated revenue also for affordable housing. So we might end up at the end of the day with maybe 3 revenue streams, not just the sales tax stream we have now and
Sure.
not just the mitigation fee stream,
Yeah.
but also perhaps a property tax component that might, because we do have relatively reasonable and low property taxes in the town of Telluride, certainly lower than the town of Mountain Village, for example, and
Yeah.
many other communities.
Right.
So we might have a little bit of room if the public wants us to.
Would that be bumped up in a ballot measure? Would that be
That
something
would have
that
to
the people
go
would vote on?
to the ballot
Uh-huh,
because of
got
the
it.
Taxpayer Bill of Rights from 1994 in the state of Colorado that says we can't impose any tax without voter approval.
Is that Tabor?
Tabor. Yes.
Ah, I heard a little bit about Tabor recently. Oh, were you a part of the teacher protests? I mean, teachers are protesting all across the nation.
I was in
We had our
Denver the
own-
first day that
yeah,
they did it, and
yeah.
actually, I've been over my spring break. I was in Denver and Washington D.C.
Welcome
So thank you. It's great to be home. When I was in Denver on 2 separate occasions, teachers had walked out of the classroom, and then there were over 400 teachers around the state capitol at one point. The first time I was there,
Wow.
I know because I was inside in the Senate chambers
Wow.
together with our Senator Don Quorum, but you could hear through the glass the reverberating chants.
Right,
So.
right.
And it's clearly something where Colorado has one of the lowest pay rates for teachers in the
Yeah,
country.
yeah.
And this is an issue that people
Yeah.
obviously need to give
Yeah,
more thought to,
sure.
and
So-
legislators need to be supportive of helping.
Yes, our teachers did not walk out of the classroom, but before school, on their free time, they stood out in front of the school and then on the street with placards saying, we have to increase teacher pay. And it sounds like it's apparently our school budget is maybe $12 million, and we come $1.2 million short every year. So 1/10 of what we should be spending on our teachers and students is not being spent. We have a budget shortfall every year of $1.2 million. Isn't that scandalous? in a
How do they
town
make
like
that
this?
up then?
I think there are certain stopgap measures where you can make that up. I'm not sure how they do it, and
Interesting.
It shouldn't be that way.
Well, I'm
whatever
happy
it
to
is.
report we don't have any such shortfalls at the town level. God forbid if we have some issue here that stops our sales tax and real estate tax collection.
Right.
But we are in the sort of the opposite position where we have surpluses of
Well, you can just
20 to
you can just-
30%
You can
every
just
year.
contribute it to the school. Just
Well,
walk
we
right
save
over
it
with the check
for rainy
Uh-huh.
days, but it's shocking to hear that. Wow.
Yeah, I know. It's kind of a bummer. Yeah. So the teachers were all out there. So anyhow, what else was happening at the town council meeting?
We also formed a subcommittee of town council that includes Tommy Watkinson, Todd Brown, myself, and Jesse Ray Arguelles McConnell. We are going to study the southwest area sort of intercept parking and circulation plan. So basically we're going to take a hard look now again at Carhenge and at the Shandoka parking lot, at
Sure.
what remains of the Lot B RV parking
Right.
lot after we finish our housing project, and decide, okay, what's our next step in terms of trying to intercept cars out here and then move people efficiently with public transit from there
Through
into
town,
the
yeah.
whopping 3 or 4 more blocks
Yeah,
and
exactly.
into the core.
Yeah.
But we'll start that process. There was a lot of learning that was done on this thing back in the 90s and the early 2000s when Elaine Fisher was mayor, for example.
Right.
And so there have been there are several studies that still have relevance today. So we'll go ahead and comb through those.
Dust those off.
Dust those off, read through everything, figure out what's applicable to our current situation, and then maybe what our long-term vision is for that part of town. We're also going to be doing a pedestrian circulation plan. Because as we all know, right around that Lulu City corner gets a little tight there,
Yeah.
and it's very hard for people, dogs, cars, bikes, to sort of
Yeah.
navigate. We have tried the stop sign mechanism there, which seems to have at least slowed speed down,
but maybe a little
we need more
speed
pedestrian-friendly
hump or
streetscape there,
Sure.
and so we need to figure out what the options are.
Yeah, what that looks like.
Whether that means sort of widening Pacific there and going toward the river, or whether there's a way to be more sensitive to pedestrian flow. Because
Yeah.
especially if we're going to put intercept parking there, you're going to have people on foot
Yeah.
with much greater frequency than we do now.
Sure, yeah.
So, and as we all know, Carhenge is great, but it's hard to convince people to park there, and so it's almost like, do you create more of a vibrant, mixed-use type of development there that's centered around a parking garage? And so maybe that creates a new...
Like a froyo place, something like that.
some nice ground floor retail
Yeah.
and some upper story affordable and market housing and a garage, just to figure out what the right solution or a menu of things that we need the public to tell us whether they want us to do it or not.
That's
So that
exciting.
process will start. That's probably going to unfold throughout the summer, and then maybe by the fall there'll be some actionable suggestions that get floated up from this committee to the town council,
Yep.
and we'll see what the full will of the council is at that point.
Mm-hmm.
We also approved the mural, the new replacement
Oh,
mural
sure,
next to
yeah.
Ghost Town on that private property. We had been, as you know, and we've talked about this in the past, we've been sort of struggling with a public art policy.
Right.
And what we've decided to do is form a committee that includes only one member of town council and 4 others, 2 who are qualified artists or gallery people, Telluride arts person, and 1 at-large person. And these people will be the ones making decisions about what art we accept to be displayed on public property.
Right, and
We
that's
are
not
not
even
going
public property.
Right, that
and
location
yet
where the
you
mural is
approved it.
private property, only because it was pending, and our new policy just got enacted on yesterday.
Oh, okay, I get
for
it.
the Public
So,
Art Committee.
Yeah,
and
so it was a twofold decision. One was, yes, you can hang the mural, and second is, you never have to ask us again if you can hang the mural.
You've said it better than I ever could. That's right, so do what you want on the side of that building, it's none of our business,
Okay.
leave us out of it.
Yeah, all right, great.
so-
And then if you want to do a public art thing elsewhere on public property, we now have this group of 5 people that we would go to,
Exactly.
and they would review it.
And then
Oh,
if there's some
exciting.
sort of public outrage about that commission's decision, it can always be called up to town council,
Yep.
but it doesn't belong at town council. It really
Yeah.
needs to be left to the arts community and the people who are well-trained in that to decide what
That sounds like a nice.
what they'd like to put on
yeah.
our town park, pocket parks, valley floor, any other right-of-way, like
Yeah.
the bus stop out here by the school. So we hopefully will finally, after many years of talking about this, finally have a group that will actually steer that forward.
Yeah.
So
Oh, that's great.
that was
Yeah,
progress as well.
Speaking of the Valley Floor, were you there when they were talking about what we're going to be doing for the Valley Floor Day on May 9th?
On May 9th?
Yeah, we're bringing all the elementary school students out to the Valley Floor for a little educational program there.
Okay,
so
that's
it's all
cool.
kindergartners, first and second graders, split into groups of 2, and then further split down to groups of 8, so
Mm-hmm.
that there's no density on the Valley Floor. And we'll have 10 different scientists doing scientific lessons on the Valley Floor with the kids, so that they can understand water and hydrology and fish and insects and willows and meadows and spruce trees and prairie dogs and keystone species. It's going to be fabulous.
Wow, what time is that? Is the public allowed, or is because
no,
it's a school thing, it's like a
because
private?
it's a school thing, so
Okay.
we're excited about it, and it's part of Valley Floor Day and the celebration of the
Mm-hmm.
Valley Floor, and it's a lot of collaboration. It's the Pinhead Institute, it's Sheep Mountain Alliance, I think it's the Valley Floor Preservation Partners, and then it's probably the Telluride Institute, which also does the
Mm-hmm.
Valley Floor Living Classroom. I might have left some other people out there. And then, of course, it's in collaboration with the elementary school and supported by the Telluride Education Fund. So, so it's got a lot of partners, and it's a great, it's a great hands-on learning experience for these very young children. It's going to be a lot of fun, and the Valley Floor is ours, right? So anybody can come out and take a look.
Absolutely, anytime, yeah.
Yeah. So anybody can come and check it out, see what we're doing. But we have a lot of kids that we're moving through there, and we're just really excited to be able to bring them there. And it was the brainchild of a young guy who works with Pinhead, teaching our tech class in the school here, and then he also works with Sheep Mountain Alliance.
Is that Joe Cullen?
Joe Cullen, yes,
Yeah.
exactly. Our little superstar, Joe Cullen. It was his idea. He's made it all happen. And then, of course, the Telluride Education Fund decided to help fund it. So we're super excited about the partnership.
Well, since this is college acceptance time, Joe Cullen and I went to the same college.
Oh, that's
So,
great. I love
he's a little
him.
bit younger, though.
He's just a little bit younger.
Yeah.
Yeah. Another great human being from
Davidson College.
Davidson College,
Yep,
yeah.
in North Carolina.
Yep. Oh, he's wonderful.
Well, that's very encouraging. Yeah,
Yeah.
Joe did speak at the meeting as well. And obviously last year, those of us that participated in, there were 3 walks, each approximately an hour and a half, that were great, starting at different points on the valley floor. So there's all sorts of stuff out there that if you just go and absorb, even if you're on
Yeah.
your own,
Yeah.
you have no idea
Yeah,
that this is so
it's
close.
a wonderful resource.
So we should all try to take the time whenever you have, if not May 9th, then some other
Yeah,
time
sure.
throughout the year.
Yep.
Because, and the other thing we're doing on the valley floor is we're taking the excavated dirt out of the AHA School location, the Four Corners
Oh, sure,
location,
uh-huh.
and we're going to be continuing our filling of the old straight river channel.
Where it used to be a channel and now it's back to the meander. So
Right.
you're filling in the
So
channel.
the former
with the stuff
channel,
from the
which
Four
looks like a
Corners.
long rectilinear ditch,
Yeah.
we're taking the dirt from the Four Corners project and completing
super.
the fill there.
Oh, nice, because
so
I'm
that
sure
it-
they got a lot of fill
it can
from the
vegetate
Virginia
over and-
Placer housing dig too.
We did some, but we could use more. So our estimate is that we will be able to get it completely filled now with the dirt coming out of the
Can
aha
you use
corner.
any old Christmas trees? Because I'm a little worried about fire danger, but you probably can't use those for fill. But let's talk about fire danger next.
Yeah.
Shall that be our segue?
Sure.
Fire danger, fire danger, fire danger.
It's,
Yeah.
it's a real concern. Obviously, there's actually there's a seminar next week. This is more related to natural gas issues, but Black Hills Energy is sponsoring something for the Telluride Fire Department, the Montrose Fire Department, and Norwood to convene in Montrose and talk about fighting a fire that might be started by a natural gas source.
Okay.
And thankfully, I understand we did have a little bit of a natural gas pipe break at our excavation site, which we repaired promptly, but there was an odor of natural gas that was permeating the air, and so
Yeah.
we certainly wouldn't want any sort of fire event associated with that.
Yeah.
So there will be that. In addition to that, we also approved an all hazards plan, which
Yeah,
was the
talk about
county
that.
and actually the entire fire district here. They do constant analysis and study, and they have some really amazing people that come and advise them. And so it's basically like, what do we do in a worst case scenario, and what's the highest fire risk, unfortunately for them, is up in the mountain village and the ski ranches. And so that's really where most of those experts have said, okay, this is the greatest likely problem. You need to do fire break kind of private property management. So this might be something as well for people in town to think about.
Right.
Those of us who live right adjacent to, the toe of the slope, and
Yeah, and fir, pine, or spruce trees, which are more flammable than the aspens.
than the
I
aspens,
understand.
yes.
Yeah.
That's absolutely right. So, and we haven't had a fire here for anything that was a, a natural species sort of clearing out fire for 100 and some odd years. So we are theoretically, scientifically overdue
Yeah.
for something of that nature. And my understanding is the Bureau of Land Management actually just adopted for this summer, I think it starts immediately, a campfire and smoking ban on all of BLM property.
Okay.
The Forest Service is expected to follow suit fairly soon. I would assume that San Miguel County would do that as well.
Yeah.
And we probably will follow suit as well.
Wow.
So,
Okay. Yeah.
but,
So we're doing everything we can to avoid fires in the first place.
And then when we have to fight them, obviously I didn't know about this, and my level of detail is a little bit slim, but there are all these compacts between these different firefighting entities throughout the state of Colorado and actually the Southwest. So if we were ever to have an event, then our chief, Bennett, would call in various other responders within concentric circles.
Sure.
And ultimately, we could have the resources here probably within 48 to 72 hours, which would allow us to, fight a major fire, but let's hope it doesn't come to that.
Yeah.
But we do have resources and backup beyond what we might otherwise imagine.
Yeah.
So,
Sure.
and we would do it for them as, reciprocal arrangements. So if there's a lot of Arizona right now up by Flagstaff, I think,
Yes,
has
right.
experienced a terrible fire.
Yeah.
So I'm sure there are probably crews from Colorado that have headed over there. I don't think any of our local guys are going there, but yes, we
Yeah.
are
So we have to
always
be aware.
mindful and prepared for that.
So
and
clear brush around your house.
don't use water, and please don't smoke, and don't light campfires this
Yeah,
summer.
exactly.
So, and if you can, get rid of any consumable sort of fire. What do they call those things? There's like a term of art for these, but things that burn. So please remove those flammable materials, and also think about whether or not it might be prudent to remove trees if you're living outside of town to create some fire breaks here and there.
Yeah.
I know the town of Mountain Village has actually underwritten an effort among their homeowners to do just that, to both remove dead wood as well as to create some breaks. So, and aspens are a good natural fire break too, so plant
Right.
aspens.
Plant aspens. Okay, there we go. Don't
So,
remove the aspens.
but don't
I
water
guess.
them this year.
Yeah, right,
So
don't
maybe
water
next
them.
year,
Yeah, maybe you
when we're
plant
not
them
in a
next
drought
year. Yeah,
condition.
yeah.
But it's scary. I mean, this whole drought condition is definitely south of us in Cortez, Durango area. It hasn't really, the extreme drought hasn't quite reached us, but we're very close to
Yeah, yeah.
that condition. So.
Let's talk about sales and our real estate transfer tax.
We're still basically sitting at about 5% down for sales tax and about 15% up for real estate transfer tax.
Okay.
So we're still in okay shape. We'll know more at the end of May. We'll have some updated data at that point. So stay tuned for our next conversation.
Yeah.
But so far, the winter was not nearly as bad as we expected in terms of lack of snow equaling lack of tourism or lack of spend.
Right.
It it was a more softer blow than what we feared.
Yeah.
So I think that is to the credit of the Tourism Bureau. Certainly the town of Mountain Village and the ski resort did heroic efforts during the ski season to keep people entertained and engaged.
Yeah.
They even underwrote things at the Nugget down here in town. So we hope never have to repeat that, but
Yes.
they did a great job this winter of trying to sustain and keep people here and attract people, or at least not get them not to cancel their trips.
Right,
So,
exactly. So
but
down
all in all, I think we're fine.
5% is not bad for our budget,
It's not
right?
bad. I mean,
that keeps
we
the
plan
lights
for a
on.
20%
Yeah.
surplus
Okay,
anyway.
okay.
So all we're doing is reducing the surplus.
Okay, got
so
it. Yeah,
we are
so we can
not
keep the lights on
in a
and the
financially
streets
precarious.
plowed. It's so crazy. It's May and it's dumping snow outside.
Well,
Welcome to Colorado.
We'll take the moisture, and I
Yeah.
guess those of you who could skin up somewhere
Yeah,
where it's
exactly.
at
Go
least
enjoy.
skiable, go enjoy.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I mean, certainly we don't really have a mud season this year because there's not enough stuff to melt.
Yeah.
So doesn't it feel that way to you?
It does. Well, I
mean,
have two huge dogs that are very hairy, and so empirically, I have the proof that there is no mud season because our rugs remain just slightly dingy instead of trashed as
Yeah.
normal. Yeah, it's crazy. There really is almost no mud. I mean, it's just not good for anybody except for mine not having to wipe the dog's feet.
Well, let's hope this is the exceptional year that confirms the regular rule.
Right.
That we go back to some
Sure.
mean of reasonable snowfall.
Yeah. Anything else in the?
We did actually, at the council meeting, this is another sort of an experimental measure. We approved on first reading, there will be a second reading on May 29th for this idea of allowing horse-drawn carriage rides
Oh,
in the
yeah.
town of Telluride. So we have a party who has asked the town to consider this. We had a non-companion animal prohibition within the town of Telluride that's applicable to horses. And so unless you're just riding your horse through town in order to go to BLM land or Forest
Sure.
Service land,
Egress or
that you can
something.
do. So, one-time occasional, whatever. This would be a commercial enterprise. This would involve bringing horses here 2 days a week during the summer, not on festival weekends though, and not conflicting with other large events in town like
Right.
4th of July. But this vendor would like to start carriage rides that would start and end at the Historical Museum. So this could be a win-win for the museum. So we went ahead and amended our land use code to permit those kind of animals under certain circumstances with the conditions to be determined by the city manager or the town manager. So if we do have a vendor, now I'm not saying this one will, but let's say we have another vendor or someone else who comes along in a few years, does this sort of thing and really kind of gets carried away or out of control, the town manager can actually restrict hours of operations, can restrict the type of equipment and whatnot. So I think we're
Speaking of out of
trying
control,
an
the only
experiment.
thing I can imagine is it's pretty hilly up at the museum. Imagine like if the cart got unhooked from the horse or something. I'm always saying.
It sounds like a
danger.
movie, but yes.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Automatic brakes, I'm sure, something like that. I'm sure science can solve that problem. But that sounds like that could be
Well,
very
and our
historic
code
and
enforcement
adorable.
officers at the Marshall Station, they'll be responsible for making, for basically keeping an eye on this and making
Don't
sure
park
that
it in the middle of Main Street.
the animals are not being mistreated, as well as
Yeah.
that the operator is sticking to the route that's been outlined because it's a
Yes.
defined route. And so we'll see.
Yeah, of course, I come from New York where they have those carriage horses and everybody always complains that they're mistreated and they're kept
We
right in the
heard
center
from
of
people
town.
who were very
Yeah.
concerned about that, and actually there has been some consultation with, I believe he's a veterinarian that works for the state agricultural extension agency.
To make sure that they
And
won't be mistreated. or that
the
it's not some
feedback
kind of
we
hardship.
received at town was for up to 6 hours on 2 days a week, for the horses being on the hard surface of the town streets, would not be at all any issue for the horse health, for the health
Okay.
and well-being of the horses.
Sure.
So there you have it. That's
Yeah,
the best available
that's-
information.
That's interesting,
But-
yeah. So, any other headlines from the town council meeting? Or are you ready for questions from the community?
Town council meeting, I would say the only other couple things to plug here are, for those of you interested in toddler daycare,
Oh, yeah.
Elaine's Place out by Shandoka will be opening on May 17th.
Right,
And it's my understanding
for
that
young childcare.
for young childcare, not infants, but for toddlers.
Yeah.
So I think under 2,
Right.
I think is probably the cutoff. Not an early childhood education specialist, but
Right,
that's
but
I
it
think
has
what
openings and
they
there's
have
ads in the
openings,
paper
and
and-
I think the email address, if you're interested, is elainesplacetelluride@gmail.com.
Okay.
So if you are interested, the operator, the town own the facility, we've equipped it, and we're basically charging a nominal rent so that we can help do our part to subsidize this, and hopefully this will be space for, I want to say, between 15 and 20 toddlers. So
That'd be a great resource.
that should be great. So May
for families in
17th,
this
that
town.
will
Wow,
kick
that's
off
soon.
again. So
Yeah,
just a
that's
couple
great.
weeks.
Yeah.
The only other thing I would add is, on my spring break, as I mentioned before, I went to Denver. I spent some time with our state senator and our state representative, Senator Quorum and Representative Catlin, both of whom live in Montrose. Both of them are pretty familiar with Telluride, and for many years, Senator Quorum, at least when he was our state rep, had a lot of contact with our local government, and he continues to have a pretty strong tie to our community. He and Representative Catlin have actually been the leaders on some broadband initiatives this session.
Okay.
One of which will theoretically help us, the other one won't. But the one that will theoretically help us was the House bill that was sponsored by Representative Catlin. That allows someone who comes into a community that might already be served by an incumbent provider, i.e., let's think CenturyLink in our case, or Spectrum, whatever they're calling themselves. If another party were to come in and say, hey, we'd like to build out a broadband infrastructure in town, and what happens then is they go to the incumbent, and the incumbent has a right to match the same plan, but if the incumbent chooses not to do it,
Then
they can move forward with it.
Okay.
So that could be something that if we had an entrepreneur who wanted to build a system here, I think
Come on in.
That's a great thing.
Sure. The other one, does it hurt us or does it just not affect us?
The other one is really only for unserved areas, but what it does is those of us that have landlines, not me, but other people, part of your CenturyLink fee, and actually I think probably for cell phones too, now that I come to think of it, there's a high-cost provider mechanism fund where they basically impose a tax on your telephone bill, and they take that money, and they have historically just used it for telephone line issues. The state Senate and House agreed, and the governor signed on April 2nd, a bill that requires, I think, $150 million from that fund to be allocated for broadband infrastructure in unserved areas.
Okay.
So this could apply to parts of the western San Miguel County or western Montrose County.
Yeah.
So stay tuned, but that could free up some funds. And now CenturyLink can't just keep them in its coffers or divert them to some other activity. They have to come to unserved rural areas.
Don't you sometimes think that it's just taken so long to make this happen that there's going to be some kind of new technology just when we figured out how to do the old one?
It's funny you say that because last December I had a conversation with somebody who sort of claims he's in a position to know, and he has been advising a satellite-based, but low satellites, not high-altitude satellites, that supposedly would provide people like us who don't really have adequate physical infrastructure with really top-notch gig-level broadband.
Wow.
So
Bring it on.
I hope it happens.
Yeah.
Because that'd be nice to just stop having these hassles
Right.
and stop waiting.
Because right now it literally is down to can we or can't we dig that ditch, right? Isn't that kind of the problem?
Well, it's
one
not
of the
even just
problems?
digging the ditch. It's more about how do we get the high-speed fiber to us?
Right.
Because it's,
Yeah,
it's
right.
out
But I mean,
there.
it would be in a ditch.
It's like the
at this
X-Files.
point.
It's
Yeah.
out there, and we just don't know where it is.
Oh my
And we're
God.
looking for it, and we
If
keep
only
asking.
David Duchovny and Susan Anderson would show up.
Well, I'm sure they've been here for Film
Yeah.
Fest, and now they need to
Yeah.
get back here
Yeah,
and then
with broadband.
deal with our broadband problem.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think, and I've actually heard other people talking, and this is really a Lynn Black story. She's been the champion. She's the county administrator. She's been the champion for over a decade of bringing broadband and holding CenturyLink's feet to the fire and forcing, people to have the conversation at the state level. And so she has been marginally successful, and I think there are some other things in the works right now that aren't really publicly discussed yet, but I think maybe in the next 6 to 9 months we might be in a better position on that issue too. Part of my spring break was spent in DC, so I had a chance to sit down with both of our senators, with Cory Gardner and with Michael Bennett, as well as Jared Polis, who's the congressional representative from the 2nd District over in Boulder area. I also met with staff of the congressperson from Denver, Diana DeGette, and then I also had the opportunity to talk to one of the legislative aides for our dear leader, our Representative Tipton. And so all of them heard consistently from me that, we desperately need federal help on broadband.
Yeah.
We desperately need people to wake up and stop treating broadband as, as a non-utility. That's crazy. It has to be classified as a utility. We may or may not get much mileage yet, but at least they're hearing from us.
Right.
The other interesting part of my DC travels was not with just those elected representatives, but with some other people of the Department of Transportation. There is in the omnibus spending bill that President Trump signed, I think it was in March, there are a few extraneous billions here and there for things like small rural airports, for things like rural broadband, for things that might help us with block grants for potentially our wastewater treatment plant issue.
Yeah, sure.
So one of the exciting takeaways I had from that was I now have some contacts on those various staffs for those elected officials, as well as some partners in DC who do nothing but help small and rural communities apply for and try to get grant money of this nature.
Wow.
So we, the town of Telluride, don't historically have a long track record of seeking federal funds.
Right.
I think we have some Department of Transportation funding that's helped us with the goose in the past. But for these big infrastructure projects that we're looking at, like a $30 to $50 million replacement cost for the wastewater treatment plant, or for whatever the cost it is to build out broadband within the town and then go a couple miles down the road to finally connect to somebody's fiber, those monies in this fiscal year and the next fiscal year of the federal government are there. So it would behoove us, and indeed I've already had a conversation with the executive director of SMART about, hey, there's probably some new stuff that none of us know about, and I
Right.
just heard about this last week in Washington. So
Yeah, and PCI is working with SMART because towards the end of the year, there's going to be funds open up from the VW settlement that'll replace diesel buses with electric buses. So we're
and let's
working on
hope
that
those funds
together.
don't get spent all on the Front Range, but
Yeah,
that they get out to some
exactly.
areas like ours.
Well, we're so lucky
So-
that we have a guy who worked in that area that now is here in our region. David
Is that-
Averill is, he's just so connected and he really understands how to make it happen. So I think we'll be in as good shape as we possibly could be with that help.
I agree with
Yeah.
that. I would echo your, sort of summary there, that the fact that we were able to hire David Averill, who used to work at CDOT, who used to be the #2 guy at the Fort Collins Transit Authority, someone who's been in the business of granting the grants
Right.
before
Yeah.
and knows on the federal level as well what options there are.
Yeah.
I think we're so far ahead
Yeah.
of where we could have otherwise been.
Right.
So this is actually just the ideal person for that task.
So while we're talking about green things like
Yeah.
that, the county signed on to the Exxon lawsuit. So what about the town?
The town was asked if it wanted to participate, and there were several of us that considered it and are very sympathetic to that. Of course, you have this concept called free rider, where parties who don't join and pay for the litigation still get the benefit of the outcome. So in some ways, Telluride has decided at this moment just to be a free rider.
Why? Why aren't we signing on it?
Where we really
Don't we want
weren't
our name
sure.
in the headline?
Well, in fact, when I was in Denver, there was a nice long NPR piece on CPR talking about both Boulder and San Miguel County and the fact that they were the two leaders from our state on this issue.
For the viewer, this is a lawsuit that claims that Exxon knew that burning fossil fuels was dangerous to our health, and it's asking them to pay their portion of the damages of what burning fossil fuels have, or the fossil fuels that they've released.
And
have
so
done to
subsequent
human health and
natural
the environment.
disasters are included among that, which I don't know if you can make the causality argument all that effectively. And the other issue, which I heard from a member of our council, he and I were talking about this on the sidelines as well, the fact that you and I still own fossil fuel burning cars and we choose nonetheless to use them on certain occasions and contribute to the problem. It's not like we haven't been told and that we don't see with our own eyes that this is actually not a good thing for the environment.
Right.
So, but the fact that we nonetheless continue to do it may undermine our ability to advance that claim.
What if we all had electric vehicles?
Well, then I suppose an argument could be made that it's the electricity supply is created from a lot of fossil fuels.
Yeah, what if
Ideally, no. But if we were on solar and we were using that solar to then
Yeah.
create electricity that we then
Right.
ran our homes and vehicles with, yes,
I-
then I could see you'd have a stronger argument that you're not actually contributorily negligent.
Right, okay.
So I don't know where this will go. The commentary that I heard on Colorado Public Radio, they weren't terribly optimistic that there would be much of a chance of success, but it's certainly worth trying, and I
Yeah.
think the county and Boulder have.
Yeah, but it didn't come up to the town council meeting.
It didn't come up.
One of the town
attorney
council
from,
members who was not involved in the conversations was surprised about that.
This was something that my understanding was the town attorney was approached by this attorney, that the mayor and Mayor Pro Tem were both approached by this guy.
Right.
He sent us materials, we read them, and at one point, apparently a conversation occurred between the Mayor Pro Tem and the town attorney about this topic. I didn't have it with them on that date, and the feedback went back then to this attorney that the town of Telluride is going to wait and see. So we could still join the litigation. So it's not over at this point in terms of our window of opportunity to join.
Sure.
My understanding is, and my first question to our town attorney was, how much will this cost the town in terms of sharing of the legal fees? And my understanding was that the county paid approximately $5,000 to participate. So if that is the only outside, risk
Fee,
cost,
yeah, sure.
then it certainly seems like that's manageable and something we could do without much trouble.
Yeah, it just seems like something that we could kind of, plant our flag in the dirt and say, this is important to us, we're going to give it a try.
Okay, well, then remind people to tell us that. And those of you watching, if you have a strong opinion about this, then tell us.
Yeah.
And if you want us to be part of this litigation, we can do it.
Oh, good, great.
So we haven't closed the door on it. We've just basically said,
because that was
not
one of
yet.
the questions from the community.
No.
Ready for another
That's-
one?
Of course, yeah.
This is more of a comment than a question. It was, why are you so effective as a mayor? Said a lovely woman that I know pretty well in the coffee shop when I was getting my coffee earlier. I'm like, that's not really a question, but I'm going to say it's a question or a comment. She thought you were doing a very good job.
Well, that's awfully nice.
And are you enjoying yourself? I guess maybe that's the question she had.
Okay, I'll answer the second question. Yes, very much so. Thank you.
Okay, there we go.
It's actually the only job I've ever had that draws on every single sort of skill and life experience I've had, because I grew up in 5 different states and was born in the Midwest, lived in 2 communities in the Midwest, then I grew up in 3 southeastern communities, all very different, all racially different, all ethnically different. You name it. Then I, of course, worked as an adult for 16 years in New York, so that's the world there. And so my ability to sort of like understand and listen to different kinds of people, I think was cultivated from that. And I think that my also disposition, I don't like conflict, and I really don't. I don't think it's important to keep talking when when you can say something with fewer words. So I think that to be the most effective, you have to be, first of all, a very good listener. You have to be very empathic with all sorts of different kinds of people, not just somebody who has life history in common with you or goes to your church or shares your opinion on a certain social issue or a certain policy issue. But rather, your job is to basically listen to everybody, especially when you get elected to the town council here, because we don't have our little districts.
Right.
We represent the entire town.
Yeah.
And even though a block of people might be perceived as supporting this candidate or that candidate, whoever the successful candidates are represent every single person in this town. And so you should not, and it's unforgivable if you simply sit in your own little echo chamber and don't deal with everyone else. So I think the other thing that helps me to be maybe a little more effective is that I tend to be very calm, monotone, boring. So it's like no drama Obama. I don't know how you would label that for me, but that is really the ideal way to have public conversations and to actually have public policy discussions.
Right, because then you're not fighting back or getting
Because you don't get
pissed or-
emotional,
yeah,
and I get mad, but it's my job not to show it when I'm in a public setting, or not to show it when I'm having a disagreement with one of my fellow legislators. And frankly, somebody actually said to me today, she said, you seem to have a really good working relationship with everybody else on council. And I know there's rumors about Geneva and I having, tension here and there, but at the end of the day, we all have the same interest, and the same interest is helping promote what's best for the community in this town. And so while we may have, marginal differences, we really don't.
Right.
And this was kind of fun when I was in DC, because a lot of people, of course, know Telluride. They're like, oh, what's that like being the mayor there?
Yeah.
Do you have all this like really contentious stuff? And I'm like, you know what? Imagine if you all basically agreed on social policies, you basically all agreed on your priorities for spending on environment and spending on, quality of life, and then imagine you only have these little marginal issues like, oh shoot, how do we afford a $30 million wastewater treatment plant?
Right.
Or we really aren't that different. And so the nice thing is when you're working with 6 other people that all have this huge common denominator together, you don't have these weird personality-driven conflicts
Yeah.
because your policies are aligned, and
Right.
frankly, each of us should be continuously aligning ourselves with whatever the community values are, and those change over time.
Yeah.
So just like Tommy Watkinson mentioned, maybe it's not a community value anymore to take 20% of our real estate transfer
Oh,
tax
right,
and
for
allocate
open
it for open
space. Yeah,
space. Maybe we
exactly.
feel like we've done a wonderful job, and we have in the past decade plus
Yeah.
of doing things like preserving the valley floor, of acquiring parts of Bear Creek, and I think when you really drill down to the core of that, and you realize, okay, maybe in that case we have to wait a few years before we can do that. But yeah, the community value has changed.
Yeah.
People really need housing, and we're doing everything we can at this rate. I mean, frankly, we've overcommitted our piggy bank that's earmarked for housing. I mean, we've got these 4 projects, and one's done. The
Yeah.
other one's, excavating. Another one will probably start in the fall, the Lot B project. Each of those is $1 million to $1.5 million subsidy, and then there's the joint venture with the county out at Sunside. We have $3.2 million in our little affordable housing piggy bank, and we've got another $1 million to $1.5 million coming in every year.
Yeah.
But if all those things came due at once, we wouldn't have
Yeah.
enough money today.
Right,
So,
exactly.
but that's the thing. The community wants us to be doing this, and we had a recession that obviously slowed and stopped moving in that direction, and we heard the community loud and clear.
Right.
And that's why in the last 2.5 years,
Yeah. Well,
been
how
off
about
to
this
the
is one of the
races.
first times that I haven't had one of the community members ask me about affordable housing. I do a little survey before I come into the studio so that I know what the community's thinking about. And for once, it wasn't top 5 on anybody's list.
Wow.
You had a very personal
Okay.
answer to that professional question I had. Now here's a personal question, and that is, how are you enjoying being single?
well, how much time do you have?
Not very much time. Thin slice this one. Yeah.
It's a healthy thing.
right.
It's been a good transition for me. I have started to see somebody with some regularity who lives in Denver, and has been to Telluride actually quite a lot
great.
this winter, and so I'm hoping that works out
Yeah.
in the long run. But you never know.
Yeah.
But it's such
So
a
far,
small
so
town
good.
here, it's very hard. I've heard this advice for many years. You have to import, and so
yeah, I've heard that too.
that
yeah.
I think is probably that is my story today too.
Oh, good. Yeah, I get that. And
But-
now a professional question: what's the mix between commercial and residential on Main Street, and how is that shifting? And are you comfortable with that? I guess because the Shanghai Palace building is, I think, maybe. Is that going to not be commercial, or is it going to be different commercial? Or
My understanding is that will be different commercial below, and then above it will be
More housing.
like different residential, and maybe potentially an additional
Yeah.
story or partial story
Yeah,
that will
and
be
this
residential.
question was from somebody who rents from the Nugget Building, which I guess in the next 5 to 7 years is going to be renovated. So I think there may be 12 people who have commercial businesses there that are going to have to find other spaces.
I can only repeat
Where
what
are
I've
they
heard
gonna
directly
find?
from
Yeah.
Katrine Hornby, right? Or I think that's her last
Yeah.
name. She has a Formby, sorry, like
Formby,
like
yeah.
Homer Formby,
Yeah.
that furniture polish name.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah.
Anyway, don't believe they're any relation, but I don't know. My understanding from Katrine, the owner, the co-owner, Katrine and her husband Bill, is that they have no intention of actually, clearing out that second
okay.
floor
They'll just
of all of the
they'll do
small
sections
offices.
at a time or something.
And that what they hope to do as well is add another theater sort of screening room on the back of the existing property. So I don't know whether they don't want to lose the commercial nature
Right.
within that building. I don't think they have any intention of creating anything that's non-commercial on the second or
No,
first
that's
floors.
not what it was. It was
It's
that they
the
would have to
renovation
leave
process.
during the renovation, and where will they go because there's going to be fewer commercial spaces.
Well, that's fair. Now, the Formby's track record, as
Yeah.
we all know, is they've been at this a long time and they haven't done the whole project, right?
Yeah.
So my understanding is that they got a renewal of their vested rights with respect to the ability to build like a third-story penthouse that was not visible from the streets, and put the balustrade back on the top
Right.
of the building that
Yep.
existed in the past but is gone. But they got that extended for a few more years because they're not ready to do all that yet. So
okay.
I have a feeling that if this actually ends up being an issue, it won't be next year, it'll be 3 years from now or so. So
And then-
not that it won't be a concern at that point, but I don't think it's imminent.
Yeah, let's keep
So-
our eye on the commercial landscape on Main Street, shall we?
And my understanding to the question of what's the breakdown, the last figures I heard, and this probably is almost a year out of date, but it assumed that all approvals that were granted and in place were all built out. And that was, there was 72% commercial and 28% residential, I think. So we're kind of close to that 1/4 residential, 3/4 commercial. But that obviously is a moving target, so I guess we should look at that. Lance McDonald, keeps track of that, as well as Ann Morgenthaler, the acting director of the planning department. And so they are your two best sources for the best, latest, and greatest breakdown percentage-wise. But that's ballpark correct, directionally correct, as we used to say. Yeah.
Directionally correct. All right, awesome. Anything I haven't asked you about that you want to add to the conversation?
No, I mean, frankly, we've had a long conversation. It seems kind of impossible for the beginning of May when it's off-season and it's slow.
But there have been a lot of interesting
But there have just been a lot of
headlines,
things that have kind of finally blossomed or come to fruition, or whatever metaphor you want to use, and that we've finally been getting done. So that's hopefully in the best interest of everybody, and we'll, if we make a mistake, which it's possible we always do, then we can course correct.
Yeah.
So just tell us.
All right, awesome.
Or
Well,
tell
how
us
about
what
that?
priorities you want, i.e. you want us joining that litigation, then tell us.
And what's your email again, Sean?
My email is smurphy, so that's SMURPHY, all one word, at telluride-co.gov.
Awesome. How about that snow?
Well, we're supposed to get 3 to 5 inches today, aren't we? So it's all coming now.
Yeah, take it now. Precipitation is good.
We can sled home.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you, Sean.
Thanks, Sarah. It's a pleasure as always. Thank you.